So welcome, everyone. I am Natasha Lance. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. Welcome to our second Spotlight on Health with CNS, the rise of colon cancer in younger adults, what to know, and how to lower your risk. We're so glad that you're here, and please make yourself at home. So some basic housekeeping details. Closed captioning is available should you need that. You just press the little CC button at the bottom of the screen, and those will be available to you. If you do have questions this evening, and we certainly hope that you do, please put them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat, and Renee will be collecting those questions, and we'll share those at the end of tonight's session. We plan to go until 8 p.m. so that you get the full amount of information that you came for. And then after that, we will have a Q&A session that will last approximately 15 minutes. If you need to leave right at 8 o'clock, no problem, because everyone who's registered for the webinar will get the replay within a couple of days. So without further ado, please let me introduce this evening's host, Dr. Michael C. Holley. He is board certified in asthma, allergy, and immunology, and is currently on staff with the Allergy and Asthma Group of Galen in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He is a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Holley is the speaker for Dinner with a Doctor, DWTD, in the USA and Romania. DWTD is an instructional program developed to educate people about how to implement a whole food, plant-based approach for treating, preventing, and reversing disease. He was the medical consultant and also appeared in the documentary Eating You Alive. He and his wife, Cindy Holley, MD, along with their adult children, embrace the whole food, plant-based approach to health. Dr. Mike Holley is the chairperson of the Medical Advisory Board for the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. Dr. Holley, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Natasha. And before you and Renee disappear, I want to mention Renee Saka again. She is the medical liaison for our medical board, and she is a physician's assistant up in Buffalo, New York, and just a fantastic person to work with. And as Natasha mentioned, she'll be collecting all the questions that you put into the chat box, and then we'll get to as many as we possibly can during the Q&A session. So again, welcome everyone to Spotlight on Health, sponsored by the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. And tonight, we're going to talk about the rise of colon cancer in younger adults. And I want to start by introducing to you our three esteemed panelists. Angela Alfaro is a board-certified family medicine physician and a fellow at the American Academy of Family Practice. She is the founder of the AlphaDoc LLC, a personalized integrative and functional medicine practice, and the board chair of the Sound Wellness Alliance Network in Valdez, Alaska, where she advocates for her community and encourages them to live by the pillars of eating well, moving more, living socially connected, and standing mentally strong. That sounds great, Angela. She is currently creating an online membership program called Awakening, Restorative Medicine for Women. Matthew Lederman is a board-certified internal medicine physician and CNVC certified trainer of nonviolent communication. His wife, Alana Pulde, MD, is a board-certified practitioner of acupuncture, oriental medicine, and a family medicine physician. As a husband and wife team, they have been successful corporate medical advisors, featured experts in the documentary Forks Over Knives, lecturers for eCornell, and adjunct medical school professors. Together, they have co-authored 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Forks Over Knives Plan, and most recently, Wellness to Wonderful. Their latest venture, We Heal, integrates their decades of learning and practical experience to help people achieve lasting health, vibrancy, peace, and joy. Dr. Milton Mills practices outpatient clinic-based medicine in underserved communities in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Dr. Mills is the medical director for the United States Census Bureau in Suitland, Maryland. He is also the founder and president of Physicians for Healthy America, an organization of physicians of color focused on promoting the benefits of plant-based diets. He graduated from Stanford University School of Medicine and completed residency at UCSF Fresno and Georgetown University Hospital. He has lectured and given research seminars throughout North America, Ireland, and the United Kingdom on several preventive health topics, including negative impacts of meat and dairy consumption on human health, and he'll be talking a little more about that tonight, nutrition and HIV/AIDS, as well as nutrition and cancer, and the dietary needs of various ethnic groups. I welcome all three of you. So glad you could join us tonight. We are looking forward to our discussion. And I want to start out with just a little bit of background information. You know, the American Cancer Society says colorectal cancer is the third leading cause of cancer death in men and women in the United States, and that 1 in 5 people who are diagnosed will be younger than 55 years of age. Now, that last sobering statistic is one of the reasons that they're recommending now that you get your first colonoscopy at age 45. The rate at which people are diagnosed with colorectal cancer in the US is actually dropping amongst those 65 and older, largely because they're getting those colonoscopies. However, according to research from the American Cancer Society, colorectal cancer rates are rising in younger age groups. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight to talk about that. In 2020, 12% of colorectal cancer cases were diagnosed in people under 50. Rates have been increasing since the mid-1980s in adults ages 20 to 39, and since the mid-1990s in adults 40 to 54, with younger age groups experiencing the steepest increase. In recent years, death rates have declined by 3% per year in people 65 and older, but they've increased over 1% in those younger than 50. Rates of colorectal cancer cases and deaths vary among different racial and ethnic groups. Rates of colorectal cancer were lowest amongst Asian Pacific Islanders at 30 per 100,000. Next, the non-Hispanic whites at 39 per 100,000, Blacks at 46 per 100,000, and the highest rate was among Alaska Natives at 89 per 100,000. Death rates follow that same trend. However, the difference among groups is about twice as large. For example, colorectal cancer rates are about 20% higher in Blacks than non-Hispanic whites, but the death rates are almost double, 40% higher in Blacks. And among Alaska Natives, death rates are about double those in Black. So, share with us your thoughts on the increasing trend of colon cancer in younger populations, and also the increased incidence of colon cancer in some of the minority populations, particularly the African American and Native American population. And Angela, you may want to start, since you're up in Alaska with the Alaska Natives and the higher rate of colon cancer.
Yeah, hi, thanks. And thanks so much for having me on this panel. So it is true that there is higher incidence in Alaskan Natives, and we don't quite understand the reason, but I think we really do know what the reasons are exactly. It's so prevalent that the Alaska Native Tribal Consortium has actually started to recommend that Alaska Natives have their first colonoscopy at age 40. So they even go a step further. You know, in 2021, when guidelines changed for the United States Preventive Task Force and the American Cancer Society to recommend age 45, the Alaskan Native population had been recommending that we start screening at a younger age because of that increased incidence. You know, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of social pressures, a lot of distrust in the medical system. And so a lot of missed chances, missed diagnosis, as well as there's not a lot of doctors doing those procedures here in Alaska. The population is small compared to other places, but the land is vast. And so trying to take care of people in a land that, surpass almost half the size of the United States with a very small amount of physicians has made it more difficult to screen everyone. And so we think that a lot of this trend is because of lifestyle changes. I think we're going to delve into that a lot here, but take away traditional eating, hunter and gathering, to traditional food, to, standard American diet foods, and to alcohol. Alcohol is a humongous problem, and we know how alcohol contributes to cancer increases. And so you've got, sugary beverages, taking away their traditional foods, transplanting that instead with processed foods, drinking a lot. And so then you just have this recipe for increased oxidative stress and increasing risk of cancer.
Milton, Matthew, what do you think?
I think that the first thing is, and I spend a lot of time in my lectures trying to help people understand that human beings are, by anatomy and physiology, plant eaters, and that the digestive equipment that we have is designed to handle plant material. And that's important because plants take plant tissues require much more processing and take a longer time to extract the nutrients and energy from, because of the presence of fiber. And then the fiber itself can be acted upon by the bacteria in our colons, or also known as our microbiome, to break it down into some very, very beneficial compounds. Whereas when you look at the digestive tracts of meat-eating animals, they're very, very short, because animal tissue has no fiber. It is broken down very quickly, and the nutrients are absorbed, and then whatever's left over has no nutritive value. It can only be putrefied or broken down into toxic compounds by bacteria. So it's eliminated from the body very quickly. That doesn't happen in human beings. And I think that if you look at the rise of fast foods in the United States and other Western nations over the last 40 to 50 years, it parallels very closely the trends that we see in terms of increasing disease rates, particularly things like colon cancer, because people are eating more animal tissue, more animal protein than they ever have previously. And all of the data on per capita meat and cheese consumption shows that. And so that is, I know that when I was younger, and I'm over 60, most of our meals were eaten at home. They were balanced meals because that's how our mothers were raised, to be good housekeepers and to, have meals that had, vegetable salad, and yes, there was meat, but it wasn't the majority of it. Now people are eating huge amounts of animal protein at every single meal. Again, my parents didn't have McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and actually those things really weren't a part of my life till I was more of an adult, because the proliferation of these fast food outlets has just taken off. And it's not just the burger joints, it's also the pizza and so forth. And even worse, and this is outlined very nicely in a book, and for some reason I'm blanking on the name of it, but it'll come to me later, that these restaurants are targeted to inner city areas where people of color live. And again, because the products are subsidized so heavily by government checkoff programs and so forth, they are cheap, and so they're easily accessible for people of color. They are cheap and easy to access, and so people are literally from a very early age eating huge amounts of animal protein, which is quite frankly toxic to our colons and creates all sorts of cancer promoting compounds, and also shifts the microbiome, the bacteria in our colon, to it's kind of a what's called dysbiosis. It selects for bacteria that, instead of making beneficial things like short chain fatty acids, it actually putrefies leftover bacterial residues. So, animal protein residues. Let me just give you a couple of quick stats. It's estimated that on the average American diet, 12 grams of animal protein residues are delivered to the colon every day. 12 grams, and that is broken down by the bacteria into toxic compounds like ammonia. And just the ammonia alone, it is estimated that eating the usual American diet over a 50-year period, people will produce up to 60 to 70 kilograms of ammonia in their colons. And ammonia destroys colonic cells, it alters DNA and RNA synthesis, promotes the growth of cancer cells, and it can actually retoxify carcinogens that our liver has detoxified, meaning that the liver will detoxify certain carcinogenic compounds by attaching various chemical groups to it. But things like ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and the other breakdown products of these high animal protein diets can actually strip away those protective compounds and actually reanimate, so to speak, those carcinogens, so that you have a very toxic cancer promoting environment in our colons. And that as we see people eating more and more animal protein from an earlier and earlier age, it's resulting in higher rates and earlier rates of colorectal cancers and other cancers.
Matthew, any thoughts?
Yeah, I love what everybody's saying, and I don't want to just repeat that. So at the same time, I want to sort of expand. Like, I think I tell everybody, every client, every patient, you have cancer, right? Right now, you have cancer. The question is it big enough and aggressive enough to be picked up on the tests? Usually cancer's 10 years or older by the time we can pick it up on tests. Some are more aggressive, some tests. And at the same time, we have genetic tests that can sometimes say you're going to have cancer, but you're never going to have cancer. So it's like a whole confusing minefield out there. So the question is, what do you do? And what I tell people is to increase everything that's going to support your natural cancer fighting immune system. What's going to support that, and decrease the toxic burden that the system is having to work against every day, right? So environmental contaminants, and changes in the cells from exogenous hormone ingestion, and I mean you want to be careful. You want to make sure that you're taking steps to get that in balance, and at the same time, our whole lifestyle is out of balance, right? Nutrition is by far the fuel for colon cancer, right? That is, if you eat a super clean plant-based diet, it's going to be extremely difficult to grow colon cancer, right? So I think of it that way. Not necessarily impossible, but the risk is way, way lower. And if you now let yourself get overweight or obese, if you stop moving and become sedentary, if you start eating more processed foods, if you eat more animal foods, and all of that is adding this toxic burden that your system has to work harder to fight all the cells that are changing into cancer on a daily basis, right? And then also fueling them to grow faster and their doubling time increases, and they're going faster and faster. So what can we do? Nutrition, right? But then on top of that, I think there's other things that we can do that are lifestyle related as well, right? I've seen some interesting studies. Again, it needs to be more, I think, more effectively studied. But I saw studies around effects on the microbiome that we all know is important for colon cancer and colon health, right? People who suppress their emotions have less diverse gut microbiome. How you navigate emotion impacts the ratios of bacteria present, right? Women who reported being happier, more hopeful, and having better emotional management skills resulted in specific bacteria being present in greater abundance, right? There was people who were angrier it was one of those, there was a meta-analysis that looked at anger and emotional regulation and how that increased risk of colorectal cancer. And I'm not saying there's, that's the cause. What I'm saying is that there's so many things that we can do. And I saw some questions pop up on here. Hey, if I'm eating a clean diet, is there anything else I can do? And I think that's what I want, diet, nutrition. And then can we get some of these other lifestyle factors that I think are becoming more out of balance, and particularly for the younger populations too. Younger kids, there's other studies I pulled around Gen Z is currently reporting more, whether they're actually more stressed, they're reporting a sense of feeling more stressed and hopeless about their future, financial security, quality of life compared to their older counterparts. In other words, there's something going on when their body is saying, hey, we're more stressed, they go into this high alert state. When you go into these high alert sort of survival, fight or flight mode, that autonomic nervous system actually stimulates pro-inflammatory pathways, similar pathways, the same pro-inflammatory pathways as this unhealthy diet does. My point is not to say which is it, it's to say let's do both. How do we do both? And I think that's really important that we start including all of it.
Yeah, good point. So, we've sort of moved into talking about causes and microbiome, and we all know that the microbiome consists of microbes that are both helpful and potentially harmful. Most are symbiotic. In other words, both the human body and the microbiota themselves benefit, but in some numbers they are pathogenic, and these are the ones that promote disease. And you all have mentioned, both nutrition, what we eat, the meat, the cheese, etc. And then Dr. Lederman has introduced the other factors besides nutrition, like stress and those sorts of things. So talk to us a little bit more, all three of you, a little bit more about the microbiome, how it's directly related to cancer, and then more specifics about what should we be doing nutrition-wise, lifestyle-wise, stress management, those sorts of things to make things better for us.
Can I jump in here?
Please.
I just want to say, boy, that information about people who are constantly angry and upset at the world, that's bad news for people who watch Fox. But anyway, let me hit share screen, and I want to share a couple of pictures with folks. The first is this slide here, which shows you the colon in a wolf versus the colon in a horse versus the colon in a human. And it's very clear whose colon ours looks like. And we know that the diet for equines is a plant-based diet that actually is centered around high nutrient plant foods like grains and beans and so forth, and has a lot of fiber. And the human colon is very similar to that. Now, really, what's really important is that the cells in a human colon prefer to get their energy from the breakdown products of fiber. They prefer butyrate. Okay, butyrate can only be generated by a healthy microbiome acting on plant fiber and a wide variety of plant fiber. I'm not talking about Fibercon or Metamucil. I'm talking about whole plant fiber to break it down into butyrate. And butyrate is so important because, number one, it's used by the colon cells primarily as their energy source. It helps them maintain tight junctions so you don't get this leaky gut with the leakage of bacterial endotoxins and protein fragments into the bloodstream. But even more importantly, butyrate stimulates colon cells to mature properly so that they don't go off on these cancerous byways and end up turning into polyps, which can then go on to form cancer. Let's see, let me show one other picture that's really important. This is showing how colon cancer develops over time. And, stage 1 is a very small polyp that over a period of, 5 to 10 years enlarges into these very large polyps. And it's when you get to stage 3 and stage 4 that cancer begins to develop here in the tip and then invade back through the wall of the colon, and you have metastatic colon cancer. And we'll talk about this later with respect to why colonoscopies are so important. But the point here is that butyrate can actually act at these earlier stages to either prevent the polyps from forming or stop them from going into cancer cells. That's if you are eating a whole food, a plant-based diet that has a variety of different plant fibers that have helped you select for a bacterial population that can break down that fiber into the butyrate that these colonic cells want and need. If you are eating a high meat diet, instead of fiber, you're delivering animal protein residues, which creates ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, cresol, and a bunch of other toxins that actually accelerate, as the other doctors have said, the development of these polyps and the cancer itself. And so that's why, again, diet is absolutely key and critical. And if you're not eating the right foods, you are truly selecting for disease.
Yeah, I'd like to continue on that. And I think what needs to be understood is that our gut will, it's going to move things out. That's what I tell my patients, is that if you're preferentially eating high sugary, traditional diet of, sugary items and processed foods, then the bacteria that digest all of the other things are going to hit the road. They're going to leave. They're not going to be around, right? And so if they're not there, then they can't produce all of those marvelous compounds that help to heal the gut. And so this could be a reason why when people don't eat vegetables, or now they're starting to introduce them, that now they get a lot of GI upset. That's expected, because you have to reintroduce all of these good bacteria into your body, and they're going to make gas, and they're going to make all this bloating, and that's going to happen. And so we need to just remember that, so that we don't assume all of a sudden that we're allergic to whatever that we're eating. There are some allergies or some food sensitivities that I find, and I do some of those testing in my office. But hands down, when I find that the sensitivities lights up like a Christmas tree, it's because their gut is a wreck. It's a mess. And it's because all of those small, tiny proteins are now being recognized by their immune system. And then now your body's going to attack that. And it's going to have some mimicry to other organs in your body. So, of course, you're eating high inflammatory foods. Now your joints hurt. You're eating high inflammatory foods. You have headache, or more likely to get multiple sclerosis or any other autoimmune disease. So I think it truly goes hand in hand with the type and number of the bacteria that are in your gut. So that if you did eat some meats from time to time, some animal products from time to time, it's not the end of the world if the entire other stuff that you're eating isn't a plant-based. And we see that in blue zones all the time, right? Is that they may eat small amounts of animal proteins, but that is an accessory, or it's very, very tiny. But their gut is used to eating all of the other beneficial nutrients. So I wanted to talk about two inflammatory compounds. So one is TMAO, if you've heard of that. So trimethylamines, that is going to be produced by the bacteria in the gut. And the more animal proteins that we eat, the more we make. And so it's not just that we're eating those things, but that we're making this kind of an inflammatory, which then that particular compound, TMAO, has been associated with increased risk of colon cancer. So that's something to pay attention to. And you'll find that a lot of those meats, the carnitines, choline, things like that are found in animal proteins, are going to break down. And then the gut's going to act on that. And then you're going to get increased risk for cancers of those things. And the other idea is this idea of inflammation. And, we've been doctors for a while, and way back when, we didn't really know what this inflammation was. We knew that an artery went from point A to point B. And if blood didn't get to the heart, then you had a heart attack. And if the stool didn't get where it needed to go, there might be a blockage. Or if the nerves didn't work, it's because they weren't working. But now we know that those guys are just as much living tissue as the rest of us. And so they make compounds that are inflammatory, or they can be anti-inflammatory. And so when we think about heart attacks and all the inflammation that comes about, that can happen with cancer and everything else. And so I truly believe that inflammation and this stress, exactly what Dr. Lederman talked about, because the brain stress, the toxic stress of perceived stress and what's going on in the world is also causing more of this inflammation. And if we can't fight that inflammation, we're going to succumb to the inflammation. And what does it better than anything is the plant-based diet. One last thing on that is the carnivore diet. I just want to mention that because that is a popular trend right now as well. And one of the recent things I saw was about butyrate. It's like, oh, we're making tons and tons of butyrate in the bloodstream. Well, that is not getting to the mucus layer, right? That's like, for docs out there, if you take oral vancomycin for Clostridium difficile, you need it orally, right? Because the IV stuff doesn't work. So you have to get it to the point where it has to work. So butyrate in the blood from a ketogenic diet like the carnivore diet is not sufficient to protect us from cancers. And we'll see what's going to happen, right? History will show us how this is going to play out.
Yeah, great points, Angela. Another comment I'd make about the TMAO is that if you look at the gut bacteria of vegans, their bacteria cannot transform the TMAO, so they don't make it. Whereas the meat eaters, they can. So yeah, very important. Matthew, some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think people covered, and with the time, I just want to add that this sort of Colin Campbell taught me, right, where we try to find all the reasons and prove to me that this is the right thing, and you have to show me the mechanism, and it's this molecule and that bacteria, and sometimes it's also helpful to simplify and just step back and say, when you eat a whole foods plant-based diet, these things improve and your body works the way it's supposed to. When you eat this American diet or this Western diet, things start to fall apart. We talk about inflammation. Inflammation isn't a bad thing. Inflammation is great when you're trying to heal damaged tissue, but we're chronically inflamed because we have damaged tissue everywhere. That's not normal. We shouldn't have that. So it's not that inflammation is a problem, it's that we're doing something that's damaging tissue all over our bodies. That's the problem. So let's back up and let's fix that problem. So I just think that's helpful to sometimes simplify it, because then we'll say, oh, well, if you do this diet and it causes this bacteria, and if you do that diet and it causes this in the blood, it can start to confuse you, right? And that's why I like the study, Mike, that you circulated, that when you compared the two populations, right? You had African Americans and then Africans, and it was so clear, right? It was just like 0 to a rate 9 to 0 ratios of mucosal proliferation, or it wasn't like a little subtle, well, I can't really tell. It was like, when you follow this diet with this level of fiber and this type of nutrients, fine. And you did this one, it was a mess. And I think that's sometimes helpful just to simplify it a little bit.
And that same kind of study is in Alaska. Sorry, the Alaska Native, they're having a very similar study from February 2020, where they're looking at the same thing, at rural Africans versus Alaska Native population, and just the gut microbiome. And there's tons of initiatives through different organizations in Alaska to try to study those very things, fiber on the diet. Go ahead, Milton.
No, I just want to share a couple of quick pictures for you guys. I think that kind of illustrate the difference here very well. So this is what it looks like when you're eating a healthy plant-based diet. You have the bacteria. First of all, you have a much thicker mucus layer that actually has kind of two levels. Why that's important is that it lifts up the bacteria away from the colonic cells themselves, which means that they're much less likely to translocate into your bloodstream and start to give you bad levels of inflammation. But you can see from this picture, and this comes from Scientific American, that you've got all of this butyrate being produced from the breakdown of the fiber. You have these nice tight junctions between these colonic cells because that's where they're getting their energy and their nutrition, and they're very happy. And you also are selecting for immune cells called Tregs that help, again, police your body to kill precancerous cells and also prevent bacteria from being translocated. Now, when you move over here to someone who's not eating a lot of fiber, you have a much thinner mucus layer. You don't have the butyrate. So you see these colonic cells become sickly. They can't maintain tight junctions, and you start to get bacteria slipping down into your system, bacteria and bacterial toxins, and that markedly ramps up inflammation in the body. And then the colonic cells themselves tend to have dysregulation of their DNA metabolism because of all the damage from these toxic compounds from putrefaction of animal protein that then can start the precursor lesions to becoming colon cancer.
Great pictures.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Milton. So what I'm hearing, a couple of things. One, we know that plants have a monopoly on fiber, and animal products have absolutely no fiber. Animal products have a monopoly on cholesterol, and plant has no cholesterol, right? And so these bacteria are becoming more and more important. And as Dr. Lederman was saying, it's not so much that we need to eat, food A or B or C, but we need to eat the whole food, which, when we know it's plant-based, is going to be high in fiber, which is going to feed these bacteria in the gut to help them make more butyrate and that sort of thing. So, so talk to us a little bit more. You've touched a lot on very important factors, but we know that sedentary lifestyle, being overweight, smoking, heavy alcohol, low fiber, high fat, all of those, and particularly processed meats and other environmental factors, as you all alluded to, how does all that influence our risk of colon cancer, and what should we be doing differently? Yeah, we eat more plants, but I like some of the other things that we need to think about, particularly stress in our lives and those sorts of things. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think there was, all of these lifestyle factors that we've talked about, and then some, right? Sleep, people who don't, you've been shown impacts recurrences of cancer, cancer incidence, different types of cancer aggressiveness, right? So people, just comparing 6 versus 7 or 8 hours of sleep, and not even that, significantly long periods like that, right? Similarly, lack of sleep affects the calorie density of the food that you choose if given a choice. In other words, people who sleep 6 hours versus 8 hours, the 6-hour sleepers are, when you tell them to eat the same foods as much as they want, the 6-hour sleepers will choose hundreds of calories more, will consume hundreds of calories more. That will contribute to obesity. The types of foods they're choosing are more calorie dense, which means they're going to be more processed, lower in fiber, and likely have added oils and sugars on average. That's how you get the calorie density up. So you can see how one factor can affect the others. I'm a little bit nervous sometimes to get into some of what conventional medical system calls like the softer stuff. But something is there's a really great book by James Pennebaker, who's the father of expressive writing. And what he did studies, which was fascinating at the time, you didn't even understand why it worked, but 15 minutes of putting out your deepest, most painful emotions onto paper, and then tearing, getting rid of it. So you don't have to share it with other people, but the fact that you stopped suppressing it and got it out. 15 minutes a day, 5 days was one of the studies. He was showing changes in all sorts of amazing health outcomes, everything from doctor visits to hemoglobin A1C to cardiovascular risk factors. It was really, really fascinating. And I'm not saying we know exactly why it all works, but to me, it all comes back down to putting your body into that fight or flight state. People that have experienced more developmental trauma, generational trauma, they are in a more mobilized stress survival state. That all is pro-inflammatory, right? And we can talk about why that is, but it increases pro-inflammatory cytokines. We know that high fight or flight levels will increase insulin resistance in the cells, right? So what I'm saying is that it's nutrition, 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 but then like we're pointing out, these other things contribute too. And I think the more we can include everything, but not, a lot of people just want to know what's the one thing. I would say, hey, get the diet clean. But hey, why stop at one if we're trying to live to 100 and not do it with colon cancer and chemo and radiation?
Right. Are we living longer, living better, or are we just simply dying longer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would expound on that because I do think the nutrition is super important, but when we start to go into other fields like integrative medicine or functional medicine, then the trend seems to turn towards supplements and isolated nutrients or nutraceuticals. And I had a great interest in that, but when I was training and studying in that, where was the nutrition? It wasn't really being addressed, right? And so when we talk about telomere telomere lengthening, so we can anti-age ourselves, supplements, there's companies for that. Well, guess what does that? Whole food plant-based diet, right? And so exercise does that. So exercise is going to be super important, not only for our brain health that Dr. Lederman spoke of, but also our bone health. Just every single organ in our body is going to benefit from just routine daily exercise. And so I find that a lot of people want that quick fix. They want the pill, the supplement, and they'll take a handful of them, right? Yeah. Tons of them. And then they'll say, vegetables are too expensive. Like, well, get rid of the crap that is not really being shown to be helpful and actually change your tune into eating things that are super helpful. So I think making those small adjustments are really, really possible with people if you start to look at the baseline. And I totally agree. It's fun and fascinating to get into the science of it, but it's really simple. It's really, really easy. So we can keep diving into that, but we don't have to go very far. Blue zones show us the path. And we don't have to wait for the science to show it because they're living it every day.
Exactly.
And they do social connections and they do all of our pillars in my community group, right? The social connection, your mental fortitude, having groups, getting out together and talking is what's going on in those communities. And I think we need to just keep doing that.
Yeah, I think those pillars are very important that you have as part of your group. Yeah. Milton, you were showing us before we came on, you were showing us some pretty amazing statistics about the amount of meat and cheese that people consume. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Oh, I'd be happy to. And along those lines, I just want to say that, one of the issues that I often run into with patients is that they want to do everything but change their diet. So they'll do yoga, they'll, go out and run a half marathon and as Angela says, they'll take a fistful of pills and supplements but they still want to sit down and eat a ton of dead flesh. And the bottom line is this: if you have a gasoline engine car and you put diesel fuel in it, you're going to run it. Okay. And that's just the bottom line. If you're putting the wrong fuel into the human body, it's going to destroy that body. I don't care how much yoga you do. I don't care how far you run. And those supplements are a waste of time, because if they're superimposed upon a toxic diet, you are just making expensive poop. So let me share here and bring this up. All right. So you can see what this shows. And this is stunning. I mean, really stunning that from 2015 to 2019, per capita meat consumption increased, reaching an average of 264 pounds per person in 2020. And that's an average. And you know, I always glibly tell my audiences it's much higher than that because somebody has my 264 pounds. Okay. And you know, most of the people here are plant-based, so that means that boosts it up even higher. And if you think about the fact that, you know, an average human weighs 150, 160 pounds, or should, eating 270 pounds of dead material, it's like going to the funeral parlor to have your meals, dining on the corpses there. It's horrifying. And then I'm gonna play this real quick so I can get to the cheese. The consumption of cheese is also increasing. And what's really interesting, and what has been really interesting to me, is that because of the rise of plant-based eating and plant-based diets, dairy consumption per capita, or dairy consumption as a total, has been going down. And so what the industry has responded and doing is, you know, you used to get a pizza that had a layered cheese on top, and that's it. Now you got cheese on, double cheese on the pizza. You got cheese in the crust, and Papa John's is putting cheese on the bottom. So, and burgers, there's 3 kinds of cheese on, you know, these giant double burgers, so that each individual item is much more toxic. So, when and you know what, there's one other thing I gotta show you guys. Let me bring this up so that people will understand that in this graph, you see this is the amount of leucine in various commonly eaten foods. What's important about leucine is that leucine triggers a set of genes called mTOR genes. Yeah. mTOR genes promote, in adults, promote cancer because mTOR genes tell our bodies to grow, tell our cells to proliferate, and it stops cell death. Well, that's wonderful if you're an infant or baby. But as an adult, your cells should not be trying to grow. And if you're eating these animal products, I'm not even gonna call them foods because we're really not supposed to be eating them. They are telling our cells to grow, to grow, to grow. And what ends up happening is the cells start to form tumors. A lot of those tumors are benign tumors like lipomas and cysts and moles, but a lot of them are frankly cancerous. And there's a magnificent landmark study done over 18 years that showed that the people who had the highest intake of animal protein had a 75% higher mortality overall and a 4-fold increase in cancer. And it's because animal protein tells our bodies to grow, right? Show you this picture real quick. You look at these animals, the only time they eat animal protein is when they're babies. And that means that animal protein for a plant-based animal is a growth signal. And it's the same thing for us. You start pumping animal protein in your body, you're going to try to tell your cells to grow when they're not supposed to, and they're going to start forming tumors. Bottom line.
Did you also show this slide with the graph of the?
Oh no, I can yeah. Let me do that.
That's helpful just to show that we're getting worse.
Yes, absolutely.
Particularly for younger populations, which is really concerning.
All right, let me.
And while he's looking for that, we're gonna, right after he shows that, I'm gonna have each of you give us your take-home message, your pearls that you would like to share with the audience.
We can't be to the end of this already. We just can't.
Well, yeah, we're down to about 8 minutes, Milton. Sorry, time flies when we're having fun, you know.
Apparently,
so Milton will show that slide.
Yeah.
And then
this is a slide I'm actually talking about. And what you, oh, I got to hit share. I'm sorry, forgive me, guys. I'm kind of overexcited here. All right, share, and then share. All right, here we go. So you see from this, this is, I'm gonna put my glasses on to see those small numbers.
Maybe can you hit play and make it a little bit bigger?
If you make it
absolutely. I'll be okay. I'm gonna have to like run through all the previous slides. Just give me a minute. We'll get there, because all of this data you guys have given already, and as you pointed out, it's this data is a little inaccurate because it says Blacks are the highest when we know that it's actually Alaskan Natives. All right, here we go. So this is the crux of it. And you see between 1995 and 2015, the increasing incidence in the youngest group here, the 0 to 49. And even in the middle group, 50 to 64, incidence was declining from 95 through 2010. Then it plateaued. It's creeping up now. And it's only continuing to decrease for the over 65. When you look at mortality, it was declining. It is a J-shaped curve for the under 49s. It's going up. So this is the result of the very dysfunctional diet many of us are eating, and we really do have to change our diets.
Yeah. Angela, why don't you start giving us your closing thoughts, then we'll move to Matthew, and then Milton. I'm going to give you the last word, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. So I think if we go back in our history as a country, then we'll start to really see where all this is coming from. And I think, starting even from the 20s, where the first introduction of fast foods, there's a stress of the Great Depression that was happening. 50s and 60s, it was that explosion of fast food. It was very fun and exciting to use the drive-through, right? The freedom of driving. The 70s was a concept of the paleo diet. The 80s, the stock market dipped down, the fear of the unknown, comfort food made a comeback. Bigger, better, cheaper. Like Milton said earlier, when you go to communities where it's much more profitable to have a fast food restaurant than a grocery store, then we see why there's food deserts and that fast food is so much on the rise. In the 90s, glyphosate, was started to be used on the market in such an extreme amount. And then just this boom of industrialization. So then we look at that, and then we look at this trend of protein. Where's your protein? Get more protein. You need more animal protein. Paleo diet, keto diet, get more protein. And so when you add all of those things together, while we couldn't have predicted the future from the past, we can see it as clear as the writing on the wall at this point, that we are in the place we're in because of what has happened to us as a society. And then we're also spreading that to the rest of the world. Thank you very much. And so we're increasing everyone else's risks. Because when we look at those traditional societies and other places of the world, when they come to the Americas, the exact same thing happens to them. Their increased risk of colon cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, all of that goes up. So I think we don't want to continue this trend. We have discussed this in great detail, and I think we know the path ahead. It's hard, it can be challenging, but when you have a group of people like ourselves who are promoting the message, I think it's going to be possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Matthew.
Yes, so I think for me, is simplify. The biggest risk to health right now is all the noise and confusion. And to me, if it's you eat fruits, these are the 5 food of fruits, vegetables, which include starchy vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and some nuts and seeds. And you eat as much of those 5 food groups as possible, or you eat dishes using those 5 food groups as your ingredients. And if you can do that as close to 100% as possible, life's going to be pretty wonderful. And then on top of that, all the other stuff, like Milton said, you can't do yoga and forget about nutrition. Yeah. On the flip side, doing yoga might help you and improve your health in many ways, just like all these other things, whether it was sleeping, getting movement, play, connection to your family and friends, meaning and purpose at work, spiritual connection to the natural world, getting out there, all of that's going to help your health. And what we find is it actually it increases hope and inspiration and energy and joy, so that you're more motivated to keep making the diet changes in a world that is completely set up to pull you down the path of chronic disease and to eat the most toxic foods possible. Everything is set up to support that and to make it hard to eat the foods that we're talking about. But once you set up a system that does that, it actually is not only simple, but it can become easy and a new habit. And I believe it's the natural way to live and to eat.
Thank you, Matthew. Milton, what are you gonna tell us to close this out?
I'm going to say that Angela and Matthew set me up very, very nicely, because Angela pointed out that you've got to put the right fuel, the right foods in your body. And that's where it starts. We have the anatomy and physiology of a plant-based organism. We've got to put the right fuel in it. You put diesel in a gasoline car, you're going to ruin the engine. But Matthew also points out that we're whole human beings, that is not just what we eat, it's also how we treat our mind and how we manage our happiness that gives us the best overall health. But the foundation of that is a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. And undoubtedly, there may be some people listening to this who are thinking, oh yeah, but Dr. Mills, but I like X or I like Y. I tell people all the time, nobody asked for fried chicken, ice cream, or pork chop in the delivery room. Okay. When we were born without preferences. Everything that we think we like, we were taught to like. And, I dare say that even those who are married are probably not married to the first person they fell in love with. If you are, God bless you, you're lucky. Most of us had to, kind of try out a few people before we found the right one. But if you think back to the first person you fell in love with, there was a time you thought, I couldn't live without breathing in the breath they exhaled. And then they did something stupid and you said, I got to get out of this dysfunctional relationship. Well, just as we moved away from dysfunctional relationships, we can move away from dysfunctional diets. And just like you are in love with the person you're with now and you don't miss that idiot you used to be with, you will not miss a toxic, unhealthy diet that makes your joints ache, makes you feel tired, makes you sick, and that will ultimately shorten your life. So, let's turn around and fly right and eat the foods we're meant to and treat ourselves right, and we will live happy and healthy. That's it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you all. So many great words of wisdom and thoughts. And, I'm hearing the bulk is on our physical, but let's not forget our mental and our spiritual as well. Thank you so much. Those are excellent thoughts and excellent advice. Renee, you just popped back in and you're going to share with us some questions that our audience has given us to tackle.
Yep, we've got some really great questions. So the first one is, we've touched a lot about prevention, and another important part of, colon cancer is screening as well. So can you speak on what your favorite colon cancer screening method is and why?
Milton, can you talk about what you shared before?
Yeah, I would love to. So if you think back to that picture I showed of the development of colon cancer, how it starts off as a polyp that over a period of years gradually enlarges before the cancer develops. This is why colonoscopy is the gold standard, because when a gastroenterologist goes and looks at your colon, if they see a polyp, they can remove that polyp before cancer ever develops. And I'm very upset about these Cologuard commercials because they imply that they are equivalent or as good as a colonoscopy, and they're not. Cologuard is a test that looks for DNA from actual cancer cells. So Cologuard will tell you if you've got cancer, and if you're lucky, you've caught it early, but it doesn't do anything to prevent the cancer. And that's why colonoscopy is so important, because it can actually prevent people from ever getting actual cancer by removing the precursor lesions, which are the polyps. So that is my recommendation, that everyone should have their colonoscopy screenings, because it saves lives and it prevents illness.
And also, if you're not, I had some patients who were encouraged to do the Cologuard, and when they wanted to get the colonoscopy, once they realized, hey, they weren't going to pay for the screening colonoscopy, they had to pay for it because they already done the screening test using the Cologuard. So you want to be careful if you're going to get if you're going to get the screening colonoscopy covered, you don't want to do the Cologuard.
I didn't realize that, Matthew. That's terrible.
That was, I mean, I don't know if that's all across the board, but I had patients run into that. So just check with your, I mean, after what Milton said, I don't know if there's anything to check, but just be aware of that.
Renee, I think we also should just say, like, even if people should just get their colon checked if they have symptoms of any kind. And we really didn't touch on any of that, but change in bowel habits, don't just think it's because of you have a gut problem. You know, if there's rectal bleeding, you know, you really need to be checked, especially because it's happening in such a young age that people think, oh, it can't happen to me. And then we find, oh my gosh, it is happening to you. So just, you know, be sure and be vigilant. I just had a patient today, like, really, you think I need it? I'm only in my 30s. And I was like, yeah, you do. You do. You had a change.
And let me toss out one other thing, because you know, there are people who say, well, I'm plant-based, so I don't need to get a colonoscopy. And that's not true, because we all have to understand that the risk for any given disease that we have, we've inherited part of that risk from our parents and grandparents through what are called epigenetic changes to our DNA. And so you can have a higher risk for colon cancer, not because of what you're eating, but because of what your parents and grandparents ate. And so for that reason, it is still important for even people who are plant-based to do their screenings to be sure they're okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else you got, Renee?
Yeah, so another one that kind of leads into the colonoscopy a little bit. So we talked a lot about the microbiome as such an importance in, you know, colon health, colon risks. But what about a colonoscopy itself? So having a colonoscopy, doing the prep, can that affect our microbiome? And if so, what can we do after a colonoscopy to help rebuild everything back up?
Yeah, I definitely think it can affect it, and depends on the type of prep that you're using. But there are a lot of gastroenterologists who will do a gentler prep to where you're doing more clears and you're not using as intense chemicals. And I think the best answer is what we've already said, like after your colonoscopy, then go eat some plants.
Yeah, prebiotics have been shown to be much more effective in helping to establish and maintain a healthy microbiome than probiotics. And what are prebiotics? It's just plant fiber. It's the wide variety of plant fiber that you find in different plant foods. So the fiber in legumes is different from the fiber that you find in lettuce, and it's different from the fiber you find in okra, which has tons of water-soluble fiber, which is why it's so slimy. And so we need to eat all of those plant foods, the whole variety, to get that magnificent combination, which, you know, I mean, I could really geek out on you here and tell you about the scaffolding and the gels that form in the colon so that they can process that fiber, but that's really too much. But trust me, you want all of the plant fiber, eat the whole plants, and that will help reestablish your microbiome fairly quickly, and it will give you a healthy one. I thought that question was going to ask about colonics, which to me, colonics is like hiring a workforce, training them, and then firing them every week. It makes no sense. If you eating healthy diet, you don't need colonics.
Right.
Perfect. So another question on colon health in regards to frequency of meals. So some people eat smaller, more frequent meals, maybe say 5 or 6 meals a day versus the traditional 3 meals a day that most of us kind of eat. Does eating time and transit time affect our risk of colon cancer at all?
Can I just jump in here? Here's one of the opportunities to really simplify things again. The most important, go back to the 5 food groups. The most important thing is that you eat those 5 food groups. If you're more likely to eat those 5 food groups eating 4 times a day, and if you only ate 2 times a day, you'd probably eat more of the other stuff, then for you, 4 times a day is the right amount. On the other hand, going without eating, periods of fasting, is helpful for the body and health promoting, right? I don't believe that we were designed, I think, and studies support that we're not designed to be eating constantly. But that's second to whatever it takes to make as much of your calories come from those 5 food groups as possible. That's first and foremost, I think.
Matthew, would you list your 5 food groups again, please? Because I don't want people thinking of meat and dairy and that crap.
My 5 food groups: fruits, vegetables, including starchy vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and some nuts and seeds. And if you're someone that says, I can't eat whole grains because that's important to you, or there's certain whole grain, you don't have, eat more of the other groups. But pick within those 5 food groups, and all my understanding of the data is that all of them are health promoting.
Perfect. So another question here. My gastroenterologist who did my colonoscopy told me colon cancer is 90% genetic and 10% or less to do with diet.
They got it flipped.
Yep,
That's
yep.
wrong. Yeah.
So what can we do to kind of help our medical community, who's giving out this misinformation? What can we do to help educate people?
I'm having a stroke, so I can't answer that.
I think, forums like this, and how you have some champions and then go out and they spread the word with their, area of influence. But even as a patient, like you can take this information, you can say, hey, T. Colin Campbell has a plant-based nutrition certificate. Have you taken that? Have you looked into that? Are you sure? And some doctors are not going to respond, and maybe they're not the right doctor for you, right? Like at this point in time, it's consumerism in medicine. You can decide who has your best interest in mind and go with that. And that's just hogwash. It's not all, it's definitely the opposite.
And let me just throw this out. Whenever a doctor, any doctor tells you something that doesn't sound right, patients are loath to challenge doctors, but you can say, Doc, I like to make sure I'm making my decisions based on science. Can you give me some references to support what you just told me? And if they can't come up with something other than a roll of toilet paper, what how to treat them.
Oh, I just real quick clarify something. When I say some nuts and seeds, I don't mean some as far as some are bad and some are good. I mean that just not a lot, like small.
Not a bag of cashews.
Right.
No, not a cup.
I just wanted to clarify.
And there definitely are.
Sorry,
There definitely are
nuts and
genetic
seeds
reasons for
are-
colon cancer too, right? So we should recognize that there are syndromes that have increased risk of colon cancer. But even in those people, if you have a full crazy diet of this type of stuff, you're going to increase your risk. And so you're going to decrease your risk with a whole food plant-based. So there definitely are syndromes, but that's for every cancer there is. But you should be aware of that, but that's not how it goes.
Yeah, and as Dr. Campbell tells us, you can turn on certain genes and turn off certain genes with your lifestyle. So yeah, I actually just read a study recently that said that genetics was about 10 to perhaps 15% of colon cancers, and lifestyle, diet, et cetera, was the rest. So yeah.
There you go.
Excellent.
I like to think of genes, genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger,
There you go.
Mhm.
right? That's important to remember.
Absolutely. Switching more towards the prevention side of things with children, even, what can a parent do for their children when they're in school systems that are promoting all these animal products, meats, milk and dairy? How can we help our children and really support them and reducing their colon cancer risk from a young age on?
That's a marvelous question.
So the question is, how do you help children where they're encouraged in a school environment to eat these foods that are
Exactly.
with our children? We did was really, we've never told them they can't eat animal products, but we've showed them, and they haven't, to my knowledge, at least eaten animal products. And we talk about where they come from. We'll go to the supermarket and show, oh, look, that's Nemo right there. And that's how you took Finding Nemo, right? And that's, you have to you catch them on a hook, and we explain what they do. And say, oh, you dangle food and let them trick them, and then they grab it and they get a hook in their mouth, and then they go here, and then you cut off the skin, and then you take the muscle out and you eat it. And they go, oh, that's so gross, right? So to me, milk you take the baby cow away from the mom, so that, and then you take the milk and you drink the milk out of the breast of the cow, and then eventually you just say, I don't want to eat that. And it's funny, my daughter at a young age would say, when I say, some people eat animals, and she goes, people shouldn't eat animals, people should eat food. And it was really great that she just was. But to me, it was education. As soon as we get into a power struggle, we're like, you can't have that, and they can, right? And I'll ask them when they say, hey, can you have this? And they'll say, are you sure I can't have it? I'll say, hey, if you want to eat that, that's your choice. Can we just first, before you make a decision, talk about again, so you're aware of where it comes from, that impacts to your health, because I know you care about your health. I know you care about all other animals on this planet. And then afterwards, you can make a decision if that meets your needs or not, or we can get this other burger over here that I know you like and you've been eating for 10 years. And but they have to feel like they're in choice, but I want them to make an informed choice. And I think that's the challenge, is a lot of kids don't have the information, right? Or that support in that way. I don't know if that helps or not.
Let me throw out some ideas because I'm a little more wild and maybe even gangster about this. I had some nephews. Two of my nephews came to live with me when they were early teens, and both of them said to me when they hit the door, "Well, I'm not vegan. Yeah, I eat meat." And I said, "Okay, I understand that, but guess what? I don't buy poison, and you don't have a job. So this is what's going to be served in this house." I explained to them why animal foods were toxic to the system, what they were going to do to their health. And one of my nephews had really active acne when he came to live with me. After he had been on a plant-based diet, his acne just disappeared. But I mean, like Matthew, I told him, when you get your own money,
Right,
you can do what you want with it. So if you want to go to Burger King or KFC, that's your choice. I can't force you not to. You just can't bring it in the house. You can't store it here. You can't eat it here. But if you want to do that, and I am happy to say, and I made sure that I was also providing really good, delicious plant-based meals. They spent their money on tennis shoes, sneakers, electronics, going to the movies with their friends. Never once did they bring either some dead flesh in this house or even go and spend it on that, because good food is good food, and they were happy. I would say that yes, our school systems. One of my colleagues, Dr. Lucky Mapuri, says, people talk about the school to prison pipeline. We need to talk about the school to hospital pipeline, because public school takes a captive audience and feeds them garbage, and it's training them to eat an unhealthy diet. And so one of the ways to combat that is to send your child to school with a lunch, if at all possible, so that they won't be dependent on I went to public school, the trash that's being served there. But also, again, as Matthew was pointing out, to educate them and arm them so that they understand why it's important for them not to eat that way. And what will end up happening is they're going to start educating their peers. Like, do you know what that is? Do you know what that does to you? You shouldn't be eating that. And that will help cement them in the lifestyle you want them to choose.
right, and even showing them, like, hey, if you're buying, most animal foods are raised in inhumane way or in inhumane ways. So I would also say to them, before you eat it, I really want you to watch and see where this is coming from. But it's pretty graphic, and it's going to probably make you really uncomfortable. Do you want to? So there was also that, and then 100% boundaries. We're not going to do something that doesn't meet my needs also. So my need, I'm not going to have animal products in my house, right? And we have delicious ways to meet, if you want pizza, burgers, and things like that, burritos, I can show you how to make those in a delicious way. So Milton, I love what you're doing, and I'll send my kids to your house any day.
Well, I also told them that if you eat meat, you might as well go to a funeral home and lick the dead bodies. So a corpse is a corpse.
I think the bigger problem is like the institution of the school, right? And like, how do we as individuals affect change in our school systems, because it is so ingrained. And I've been the physician for our schools, and just the money that comes from the government ends up getting all of the subsidized food choices. And so at least as parents and as participants in PTA, bring plant-based options to any and every hospitality room, work to get your concession stands out of there that has all the processed foods. And so start small in those things, because there are definite changes you can do. You eat how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We don't need elephants, but that kind of a thing, that you want to just take those little opportunities to change behaviors.
So Angie, next time say, how do you eat an elephant-sized block of tofu?
Okay, I like that.
Renee, our time is getting short. I'm gonna stick my neck out and say, let's do one more question, because I'm really enjoying our panel. So let's do one question and then we'll close it.
You got it. So the last question I have is, people with IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, are often recommended to switch to a low FODMAP diet. which does have a lot of plant-based foods, but also has some animal products. Can you touch base on that? And, is this a good thing to do temporarily? Is this something that could be helpful? Is this harmful?
Well, I'll just toss out that I've talked to some plant-based gastroenterologists, and they have said that you can use a plant-based diet to treat these inflammatory bowel syndromes. But as I was saying earlier about, different type of plants have different types of fiber, that initially you start them off with plant foods that have a lot of soluble and soft fiber. That's easier for their microbiome to process. And then you can start adding in things like whole grains and eventually things like nuts and seeds when they develop the ability to process it. And that can be a way to ease them or to move them towards health on a purely plant-based diet, because animal tissue is going to create toxins that just are not good for an inflamed colon, period.
Right. I was going to say, when you already have that inflamed colon and then you're adding in all of that extra meat, then you're getting more of LPS, which organisms that are translocating or going through the colon into the bloodstream. And so cooking really well, like we like to say, yeah, we want our veggies to be bright and crisp and green. But one of the ways with FODMAPs is because of the fiber is so hard, and probably because their gut is diseased. Why is it diseased? Because of the already inflammatory condition. So it all goes hand in hand. So if you cook the bejeebers out of it and you make your own vegetable broths, and then you slowly decrease the amount of temperature that you need, at least so you can digest it, and then you look for those more soluble things that you can add in, then you can get to a whole, a healthier gut.
Yeah, I 100% agree that it's temporary, but you can't, if you're not getting on the plant foods in and the animal foods out, you're going to perpetuate the irritable bowel. There's other pieces of, that for irritable bowel in particular that we deal with. I don't have to get into now, but I think that complements clearly a plant-based diet, particularly, maybe you do less raw food at first as you're transitioning over, right? So, but there's little things you can do to make it similar to people who try to do a low glycemic diet and think that that's the answer to treating diabetes. Right? When you have to get rid of the animal products and you got to get rid of the added fats, and low glycemic might make the blood sugar numbers look better for a little bit, but it won't fix the problem. Similarly, a FODMAP diet, a low FODMAP diet might make your symptoms feel a little better temporarily, but it won't fix the problem. So I like how everybody's talking about it. I'm on the same page.
And quickly, we've talked about meat a lot, and we haven't trashed dairy nearly enough. And I just want to underscore that the proteins in cow's milk are incredibly inflammatory, and they can cause allergic reactions in the gut. And so it's equally important not just to try and eliminate the animal tissue, but also dairy is one of the most toxic things that people can eat, and they should really move to plant milks if you can tolerate plant cheeses in limited amounts, but to just really get off dairy, because that is a very, a mother's milk has a couple things to do: make her baby grow and also stimulate its immune system. And that's why dairy is so inflammatory. It's trying to kickstart that baby cow's immune system. Well, what is it going to do to your immune system? It's going to make it act like a crazy man. And you don't want that.
Very addicting too. We talk about food addictions, like it's a perpetual cycle that just continues to reinforce itself. And so you have to break it in order for it to, and it gets better. People who haven't always been plant-based are like, I love cheese. I can never get away from cheese. And you can do that.
Yeah. And that's the one we hear a lot. Oh, it's so hard to get off of cheese, but I'm telling people that's one of the first, you just need to get off all of it. But listen, you all have been a fabulous panel of experts tonight. I really, really have enjoyed the conversation, the enthusiasm, the excellent advice, and thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight. I'm certain our audience has gleaned a lot of wisdom and pearls from the three of you. And again, thanks so much. Renee, thank you for sort of taking care of our questions and sharing those with us tonight as well. So with that, we are going to close out this session of Spotlight on Health with CNS, sponsored by the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. And stay tuned because in another, 2 months, we'll be doing this again. Not sure what we'll be talking about, but watch your email boxes for announcement on our next webinar, which let's see, I guess that'll be probably in July sometime, right, Renee?
Yep.
Yeah. So again, Angela in Alaska and Matthew in Florida and Milton in Virginia. Thank you all for your time, and it's been a great time. Been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me.
you.
And it's great being on the panel with you guys.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks.
Angela. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Everybody.